Lisa, as you all know, is one of the starter characters in Genshin Impact. Since the beginning of the game, she's been an iconic crowd favorite, but somewhat lackluster in combat. That is until Dendro came around in 3.0. Even then, I think to this day, people are really sleeping on Lisa. They don't realize how cohesive and powerful her kit actually is. And whether you're using her as an on-field driver or as a support for powerful Dendro units, she's actually a fantastic character and easily the strongest out of the starting trio. Welcome to Jello Impact, where we build and test every single character to help you decide who you want to wish for and build. Lisa's an Electro Catalyst user whose kit synergizes especially well with Dendro. Her normal attacks are Electro infused, being a catalyst, and she applies plenty of Electro through her skill and her burst as well, so she makes a fantastic driver for aggravate Fischl teams. In addition, she scales off Elemental Mastery, which gives her a ton of personal extra damage, and it's one of the best stats she could possibly scale off. Her skill has a really cool stacking mechanic, which can provide a unique playstyle and some very satisfying damage, while her burst has a great AoE and defense shred built in, further increasing her value both as an on or off-field unit. Being a Catalyst user also gives her access to great free-to-play, 4-star, and 5-star weapons, and her teams are equally free-to-play friendly. Aggravate is an extremely versatile archetype, with tons of team options, as well as working in both single target or AoE scenarios. So no matter your account, Lisa can lead the charge on one of your two Abyss teams and carry you through the hardest content in the game. And I'm serious about that. I was really surprised with how good Lisa actually performed for me. So let's start with her team. The first one I want to talk about, of course, is her aggravate setup. The main building blocks of this team is going to be Lisa and Fischl, a Dendro unit of some kind, and an Anemo unit, ideally Sucrose or Kazuha, with my personal favorite being Kazuha. You can use someone other than Fischl, like you can use her with Yai, you can use Raiden more on-field and have Lisa in the back, you can use Kuki as your healer, and then use a more offensive Dendro unit like Nahida, but realistically, for this specific team, Lisa is your go-to choice. Sorry, Fischl is your go-to choice. The Dendro unit is best chosen being a defensive option, so Kirara is a great free-to-play option, Yao Yao is an excellent free-to-play option. I've been using Baiju because I always use Baiju for this defensive slot, but both Yao Yao and Kirara can hold the Instructor's artifact set, as well as Baiju can, of course, and hold the Sumeru craftable weapon, whether it be the Sapwood Blade for Kirara or whatever the other one is for Yao Yao, giving you extra EM to either your Fischl or your Lisa, or even your Kazuha for that matter, through the passive leaf. And then Kazuha or Sucrose shredding Electro, proccing lots of aggravates. The team slaps. I don't know what you want me to say. Versus other characters that can fit in this slot, I know normally I save this for its own section, but I'm going to talk about it here just because I feel like you all know aggravate, but why play Lisa aggravate? Well, there's a couple reasons. Well, for one, normally her ascension stat, like 4-star ascension stats are often Garbo, and Keqing getting a crit ascension stat is normally going to put her way above someone like Lisa. But in this case, Elemental Mastery is actually a goated ascension stat. It's pretty much just as good as crit, as long as you have good crit stats on your artifacts. So really big W for Lisa with her ascension stat. On top of that, her defense shred applies not only for her damage, but also for Fischl. So you're actually getting increased Fischl damage. I don't know how this team calcs compared to Keqing, but it feels just as good. It feels very close to the Miko version, like really not far behind at all. If you were thinking of wishing for Miko to use an aggravate or wishing for Sino to use an aggravate, I would honestly stick with Lisa and save your gems for something else. Like, just look at my clears. It's so good. On top of that, Lisa isn't pigeonholed like Keqing is, for example, into being the driver of a Dendro team. She makes a fantastic support for someone like Alhaitham. The defense shred is really good for Alhaitham's personal damage, and she does great personal damage here herself. So even if you decide to upgrade your Dendro teams in the future and you get an Alhaitham, you can still find a great use for your Lisa on your team, whereas Keqing in this slot just would be really cope. So she's basically like a free-to-play alternative to Miko, where Miko can be your driver or your support for your Dendro units. I think people are really sleeping on Lisa as a great free-to-play option there. And the difference is much smaller than you would think. Like, I've been getting really good clears with this team. I've been very, very impressed. She also does work as a Hyper Bloom or Quick Bloom team. I did find this more of a downgrade compared to Cyno, but to be fair, I did use the wrong weapon. I'm now realizing I didn't switch her off for the Skyward Atlas when I was playing this team, and my Cyno is much more well invested. Right after I record this, I'm going to try it out, and there's going to be a word edit right above me talking about how my updated thoughts were for this team. But it very comfortably cleared the Abyss. Like, great team. You can also use her as a more dedicated Hyper Bloom driver. Again, the EM Ascension stat really benefits her for a Quick Bloom team, because you can build full crit on her, have an EM Sans, or EM Ascension stat, a few substats, and all of a sudden, you know, after Nahida's buff, you're doing great quicken damage and you're doing great Hyper Bloom damage. This team is really good too. You can use her in Taser. Not super crazy. I'm not crazy about this. I'd much rather use Sucrose as the driver or switch out Beto for a Dendro unit, but still a really solid team. You can use her as a Raiden support. It's solid. I feel like this feels like more of a downgrade compared to using, you know, Yelan or Farina or even Fischl in this slot, but it's still solid, and you get really nice screenshot numbers with your Raiden, so that's pretty fun. You can use her in double Hydro with Jean as like a budget Raiden. Again, she's more subpar in this sort of team. She really shines for Dendro. I'm very curious to see how she's gonna play with Chevreuse, because Chevreuse, obviously we're dealing with overloadeds on this team, and Lisa is gonna be proccing the majority of the overloadeds because they're gonna have the Pyro Aura, and she's gonna be applying Electro. So not only is she going to get her personal damage boosted, but she's going to be building a lot of EM on this team. She's going to need a lot of ER though, so that might hurt the amount of EM you can actually build on this team. You might prefer to run Fischl over Xiangling. So I'm not sure how well this team will actually perform in practice, but subscribe for my Chevreuse guide, and because I'll definitely be testing it out, and you'll be able to see, I mean, and if you're watching this when the Chevreuse is already out, then you can go watch it right now. You can also use her as a Lisa support. Again, not my favorite. Raiden or Fischl gonna be your better choices overall. So I would mostly stick to either this team or the Alhaitham team or the Hyper Bloom or Quick Bloom teams. Like, I'm gonna be real with you. When I actually use them, it just doesn't really feel like a downgrade. Like, especially since my Lisa isn't crazy invested. Like, if you actually got, like, I don't know why I didn't put her on my 4-piece TF set. My 4-piece TF set's so good. I just kept using her on the 2-piece. So and my talents aren't that crazy leveled up. I think you can push some really impressive clears with Lisa, and that's just so free to play friendly. Like, Fischl's from the shop, Yao is free. The only one is your Animo unit that you gotta wish for, and you gotta go for a Kazuha anyways at some point on your account. So just insane. And then really slept on Alhaitham spread in the past. I said to always go for Hyper Bloom, but this Alhaitham spread team feels awesome. I run Kuki on, again, you should probably run the Sapwood. I run Favonius because my Lisa and Alhaitham are a little bit low on ER, but so Favonius, Instructor's Artifact set. For the build guide, number one most important thing, get your Lisa to level 90. You get like a 30 to 35% increase in damage, both for aggravate, and for Hyper Bloom damage. Really big damage increase from taking her to level 90. Highly recommend it. For talents, her burst is the most important one, but her skill and normal attacks are decent as well, especially her skill. So you don't want to ignore them, but I would definitely focus on the burst first. For weapons, Miko's signature weapon, Kagura's Verity, is going to be her best in slot weapon because she can actually take use of the passive. So if you have that weapon, like, your Lisa's doing above and beyond. But if you have access to the Lost Prayers, which I don't have, I have the Skyward Atlas, but if you have Lost Prayers, she really benefits from the crit on that weapon, so that's a really good option. Probably her next best option if you have it. I think Novelette's weapon is actually going to be really good as just a stat stick. It definitely won't beat Lost Prayer, or definitely won't beat Kagura's, but it might beat Lost Prayers because just the amount of stats it gives. You're not really going to be utilizing the passive a whole lot unless you're using her on that Farina team I mentioned, and she doesn't really use her charge attacks anyways that much, but maybe the energy is decent. But overall, yeah, just it makes it basically the crit damage stat stick. Nahida's signature weapon, 1,000 Floating Dreams, actually kind of good because of the EM and buffing your team as well. The Widsith, her best 4-star option, because she scales well with Elemental Mastery, like 2 2 out of these out of the 3 passives are really, really good, and even the attack one's not terrible. I've been using the Skyward Atlas, not as good in the Quicken teams. I've been nerfing myself, not using the Wood Sith, so just know that my clears could be drastically improved if you for yourself, that compared to what you're seeing me do. Solar Pearl is decent, not quite as good as the others, but still a very good option. The new Fontaine Craftable is her best free-to-play in general, although I've been liking the Hakushin Ring a lot, especially because of the ER it gives, and I've been using, this is what I used when I used her with Alhaitham, as it actually gives Alhaitham the elemental damage bonus as well, so really, really great free-to-play option for her. It actually ends up being her best option when used on Alhaitham teams, and it's a great option even for the Fischl teams as well. It's just that you don't need the ER quite as much because you're getting so much energy from Fischl. If you're using her as a general support or a cheaply built support for like Raiden or something like that, the Thrilling Tales is really good because just the insane attack it gives. Fav Codex, pretty solid option if you need the ER. And the Prototype Amber, pretty underrated weapon if you're trying to get away without a healer or you need some extra healing, like maybe you want to use Nahida on the team and you want to use her as a more driver for that Fischl team rather than like really focusing on her personal damage. You can focus on her more as a support, so you can maybe construct your team more like this and make it more offensive and then use Prototype Amber on Lisa for your healing. That could be an option. I like my Lisa to do big damage, so I'm not doing that, but it's definitely something you can do, and it'll be cheaper to build as well. For her artifact sets, generally you're going to want to use 4-piece Thundering Fury. I just used 2-piece during this showcase. Again, I don't know why, my brain was on vacation, I guess. So once again, if you end up going for the 4-piece, then you're going to be getting more skills in a faster time and you're going to get increased damage really, really good. If you happen to have a good Thunder Soother set, that can also be really good. I do not, but it actually is. You're going to have opponents affected by Electro often, pretty much in all her teams. So if you happen to have a good 4-piece, you can use it. Not recommended to farm because it's so niche, but you can definitely use it. If you have a really good Gilded Dream set, you can absolutely get away with not farming Thundering Fury, as the 4-piece is very valuable, giving that elemental mastery, especially if you're using it in that Quick Bloom team we talked about. And finally, the 2-piece. I just used 2-piece Thundering Fury, 2-piece attack for this showcase, so it's good, but know that you can improve compared to what I've done as well. If you're focused on her more as a burst support, then you can also go with Emblem of Severed Fates. Could be a good option if you're using her on an Alhaitham team and you need the extra ER. Or again, if you already have really good pieces, or if you want to use her as a Raiden support and you also want her to do a good chunk of damage as well, Emblem could be good, but generally you're not going to get as much value out of it as you are the other options. But you can also run support sets like Noblesse because that also buffs her burst damage. So yeah, overall, tons of artifact options, tons of weapon options, very free to play friendly, great team options. Like, I'm shocked that I don't see Lisa talked about more. Like, sometimes I test a 4-star and I just can't bring myself to do a guide on them, right? Like I meant to do a Ningguang guide, but as I was playing with her, I was just super not impressed. But Lisa is not that way. Lisa, well, she shocked me with how good she was. She is definitely going to be one of the characters that I push further because I feel like the way that I play her right now is very suboptimal. The talents that I'm using are very suboptimal. The artifacts, I wasn't even using the right set. I wasn't even using the right weapon, and I was still curb stomping the Abyss with 47-second clears, and she felt good to play. So I'm excited to build her more. And I don't even have her C4, which is her best constellations. We can talk about constellations next. Lisa regenerates 2 energy for every opponent hit while holding the Violet Arc. This is big. She gets a lot of energy from her hold skill, and it's good because she needs a lot of energy. So I've actually found this constellation quite good. Her C2, pretty nice. The interruption resistance is pretty nice. I don't think she needs either of these to be a competent driver for Fischl. Like, I don't think that they make her that much crazy. It's just like kind of quality of life kind of stuff. Obviously, getting the talent levels is nice, but I haven't even taken advantage of it because I'm only level 11, like barely more than what this gives me. It's C4. That's the really big one. When you get C4 and you're in AoE and this can pop more enemies, it's kind of it's a pseudo quadratic scaling. It has a limit, so it doesn't like go to everyone, but if you have 3 enemies that are hit by this, then they're getting hit by some quadratic scaling and it just ramps up the damage even further. Really, really crazy. C5, not so good, and C6. C6 is nice because you don't have to build the stacks of the skill for the first time when you're on field, so that's pretty cool. One day I'll get that. I'm unironically really excited to build up Lisa. If you've had any interest and you've been holding out, then you should consider it. We'll talk about value next. So for power level, I would put her in one tier lower than Miko. So I think if Miko is like an A tier character, like if my tiers are S, A, and B, then I would put Miko in A and Lisa in B. But the driver role for this team is the least important. Like, it's much more important. As long as you have great electro application, your driver is doing their job. And Lisa's defense shred and her elemental mastery and everything she brings makes her feel really, really close. I would put her like exactly where I would put Kaching. Sometimes I might even prefer her playing her to Kaching. I'm not sure. I'll have to do more testing to say whether I would put her like above or below Kaching, but I would definitely put her right around in the same place. For overall value, she has way higher value than Kaching because you can play her in those Alhaitham spreads. And of course, I totally forgot to mention, you can sub out Alhaitham for Tighnari. Like, you don't need to have Alhaitham. You can run Tighnari as the same character on that team. It's just more single target lock. But Tighnari is a fantastic choice for that weapon, for that slot. And Kaching does work with Tighnari better than she does with Alhaitham. So that's, I guess, where my train of thought was kind of going. But Lisa, her versatility, both being as an off-fielder and an on-fielder, I would put her higher value than Kaching. For overall power level, I think they're just about the same. Further testing required. But I think by building Lisa, you're sort of saying, now I don't need to get Miko, I don't need to get Sino. You know, you can focus on getting other characters, focus on those supports, and Lisa can be one of your two on-fielders for your team. And then even if you decide to get Alhaitham in the future, she can be an off-fielder. So big win for Lisa. For vertical investment, if you want to make your Lisa the best possible, obviously save up your star glitter for constellations, get her C4, eventually get her C6. You can't get her from the regular limited banners, which is quite sad, but you can always save up for that guarantee eventually. It's gonna take a long time, but you can do it eventually. And then get Miko's weapon. Miko's weapon is so synergistic with her. It's so good. That's definitely where you want to go. If you're using her, I would personally end up like your end game goal, if you're trying to like max out your Lisa and get the strongest total team, get Kagras for Lisa, get her on an Alhaitham spread team, get C2 Nahida. Don't worry about cons for Alhaitham, but get that C2 Nahida, get that Kagras on Lisa, and this team is like, you are never gonna struggle with the Abyss if you like vertically invest into your Lisa team that way. And you'll barely have, like, because Lisa's defense shred also helps Nahida and also helps Alhaitham, if you choose to vertically invest in your other characters, Lisa's still giving you gains because her burst has that defense shred, so through her passive. So I do want to talk a little bit about energy needs. If you're using her off field, I liked using her with 200 energy, and that I did use a hold skill, so I got more energy with that. So this was enough. If you're using her with Fischl, you can use substantially less. I had her with Fischl as an on fielder, and I was able to get away with just 125. And I feel like I could have used a little more, but the thing is, on Aggravate, you don't need 100% uptime on your burst. Like, it doesn't have to burst off cooldown. And I also used Favonius on Kozwa, so more often than not, I was getting my burst off cooldown. So her energy needs vary greatly, depending on what team you're running. But yeah, aim for 125, 130 if she is the driver for Fischl, and then around 200 if she's on a spread team. But make sure you test it yourself, because it's hard to control your own energy, so you got to test it yourself. Do you have to use your ER sands? Do you have to use an ER weapon? You've got to test yourself and figure out what you need for your team. For gameplay tips, I am going to defer you to the Kaching mains guide. Once again, I'll link it down in the description, but she has a lot of tech, a lot of cancels, a lot of stuff. They've got videos to watch. Fortunately, her teams are broken enough that you can kind of just spam things, right? You can just spam her skill to get 3 stacks and then use her hold skill and take advantage of those 3 stacks. It's really not too hard. You can just spam, a mixture of normal attacks and charge attacks. Do keep in mind, if you're fighting Simon on the second side, her normal attacks auto target to the turret things. They don't hit Simon, so you have to do a charge attack or her skill to actually hit the boss when it's in invisibility state, something I noticed. But in general, you can just spam these things and it works and everything dies. That's how I like to play. gameplay, but she has a lot of cool tech that if you're into tech, if you're into getting the most out of her, I think that's what's the most impressive thing to me, is that I basically butchered her build and her playstyle. I didn't use her best weapon. I didn't use her best artifact set. My talents aren't leveled up. I don't have C4. I didn't always use the best team options for her. I didn't play her the best, and we still clapped the abyss, and it wasn't even close. The ceiling is probably way higher than I have reached, and that's what makes me most excited about this character and why I can sell her to you so confidently. That being said, she's not like a must build, right? She's not like a Bennett, but she's not like a character that supports your other characters. There's other characters that are great options instead of her, right? If you have Miko, if you have Sino, if you have built Kaching, it's not like she's going to be an upgrade to those characters. It's not going to be, you know, worth building her as an upgrade over those characters. But on the flip side, those characters aren't a massive upgrade to her. She is a premier example of you build her if you like her. Also Beto, you know, Beto is another 4-star option that I just covered, and she's great on aggravate teams as well. So there's tons of competition for Lisa's spot. Probably a lot of you have already built an aggravate driver, so you probably don't need an aggravate driver. But if you haven't, or if you've loved Lisa and you're just like, I'm just not sure if I'll like her and enjoy her, I can assure you that you will not be disappointed with her performance. Your prospects. Yeah, Chevreuse is a potential option for her. As we get more and more off-field pyro characters, her Chevreuse teams could become more and more interesting. I feel like Electro is in a pretty solid place right now, having both access to spread and aggravate and now Chevreuse teams. It's hard to see us getting crazy new options in Natlin or in Shneznaya in the future. I think Electro pretty much got what it needed from Dendro, but there's definitely always, you know, there's going to be more characters in the future. I think the fact that Lisa works as both an on-fielder and an off-fielder gives her much more potential than a lot of other characters would have. For Overworld, I mean, she's SSSSS plus tier for Overworld. What are you gonna say? I mean, there's nothing else to say. Enjoy your Lisa if you decide to build her. Let me know if you have any questions or thoughts. Take care. Bye for now.